Hey everybody, we are teaching Vermillion, and this time we're going to be making a video about composition, specifically using something called the rule of thirds. It's really more of a guideline of thirds than a rule, but it's a way of composing your picture so that things feel balanced. People know where to look. They can see how you're trying to lay out your information and your image. Now, true to its name, the rule of thirds will break your picture into threes. Whether you want to break them horizontally or vertically, it's all about your information and how to balance the way all of the pieces fit together. Whether it's pure color or objects on the page, foreground, background, all of these pieces can use these thirds for layout. So, for example, if this was a landscape, well, if this was a sunset about the sky should get about 2/3 of the attention, and the landscape about 1/3, so it's still there, still provides weight, and balances out what's going on here. Now, you don't have to be exactly 1/3. You don't have to do this with all of your paintings. But this is one way so that things feel a little more balanced to anybody else who views your painting. Doesn't matter what you think, you're the one making it, but when someone else sees your painting, this way of weighting the painting, breaking it up, can help make more sense. Now, in the case of an object, a still life, most people are going to have it centered. Well, if you do have it centered, how much of the painting does it take up? If your centered painting goes almost to the edges, then it's almost overwhelming and people aren't looking at the whole thing, but pieces of it. If your object is a little bit around, say, that center third area with sufficient background support, then the overall thing, they know what to focus on as a whole rather than just trying to get the little pieces. See the whole forest as opposed to the trees, as it were. Even a vertical painting, if this was a cityscape, now I'm going to let my horizon line go up so we can focus more on streets and buildings but still get some sky. Maybe the important buildings will take about 1/3, and now we see the parks and things in the middle. Again, it doesn't have to be exactly 1/3, but that's how we're starting to build this up. It doesn't even have to be perfectly centered. I could use 2/3 for the person in my portrait, and then the other third for the home, the background, the landscape. So even things like a portrait doesn't have to always be centered, but right on that third line, having the person's face or figure is a way to have background interact with your foreground object, this idea of thirds. Whether it's horizontal, vertical, or both if you go that far, not mandatory, but suggested. If you've ever used a digital art program like Photoshop, and you have a tool to crop your picture, that crop tool will usually put in these lines. So a photographer can better estimate their thirds when they're actually laying in those 4 outer edges. As a painter, we can pick and choose where they're going to appear within that frame. And the rule of thirds helps it feel balanced. So we'll look at a couple examples here of some paintings with thirds. We're going to keep these quick and fairly impressionistic. That way we're looking at the overall balance and not at the subject matter. But here's an example where we're playing with this is 1/3, the ocean is 1/3. You can see the transition of blues. There's a nice balance using those sort of third dividing lines. So our attention is divided. This is so bright, so normally it pulls a lot of attention. So by leaving much more space here, the eye has more of a chance to absorb what's happening and isn't constantly drawn back into the flames of the bonfire. Even a more naturalistic landscape or something a little more vertical can use those thirds. So a painting like this, where it's all trees, let's actually make it bigger. If you look closely, a lot of these trees, we've actually got 2 trees here that are pretty much right on that third line. So these trees fit nicely into their third, these trees fit nicely into their third, and the space in the middle, which has fewer trees, feels balanced. Even vertically, we have the paler greens of the sunlight versus the bluer greens of the shade. Each one is strongest for about a third of the painting. And then the center is all about the transition between the two. So using thirds to help balance the way your painting feels. Even something like a more traditional landscape, this is similar to the beach one, using, let's make it bigger. So again, you can start to see, here's a case where the median line is in the middle. If we had pushed that median line up just a little bit, then we could really focus more on the waves. Or if we let that median line drop down a little bit, now we could have the tall lighthouse against the sky. So trying to find a balance, the where you push that using those thirds to help you focus which is the important part of the painting, how are you trying to express it. None of these are mandatory. All of these are just options, suggestions. Always you can have your own painting. It doesn't have to follow any of these rules, whether it's a third or not. It could be just a color abstract. Whatever you like to do, composition is how you're going to lay it out on the page. You can start to see there's some sneaky thirds starting to come in here, just so we can find out where the center is, where the balance is. Hopefully this makes sense. You can see how the rule of thirds for composition helps a painting fit nicely within your four frames of your painting, four edges of your painting, the frame, as it were. Let me know if there are any questions. We got comments below. I do indeed read them. You can also use them for suggestions on other shows. What else would you like to learn about? We do both Vermillion and the tools, but also get into painting and color theory and things like that. Let us know what you'd like to know. Feel free to subscribe so you don't miss out. And have fun Vermillion oil painting in VR.